The TDP-led NDA government in Andhra Pradesh has now decided to raise the maximum working hours from 9 to 10 per day as a part of its ease of doing business policy and for attracting investors. The government said it decided to amend labour laws to make them favourable to workers as well as investors. Now, relevant sections of the law, which allows maximum 9 hours of work day, have now been raised to 10 hours, in fact, per day. And under Section 55, there have been used to be at least 1 hour rest for 5 hours. Now that has been changed to 6 hours. Overtime was also allowed only up to 75 hours, which now sees an extension of 144 hours per quarter. The Information and Public Relations Minister K. Parthasarathy said, and I quote, these labour rules will be favourable for labourers and they will come to invest more. Globalization is happening in every state and these amendments were brought to implement global rules. Now further, the cabinet has also relaxed night shifts for women to enable them to work in night shifts. According to the minister, women were not allowed to work in night shifts earlier, but now they can, with safeguards such as consent, transport facility, security and surveillance. He said that the workplace of women during night shifts must be fully illuminated. The minister further said that when you work extra, income will increase, and by these rules, women can work in the formal sector. They empower women economically and promote gender inclusion and industrial growth, also contribute to women's empowerment. Are worried. K. Ramakrishna, State Secretary of CPI, alleged that the centre and the state governments are working against interest of workers. To oppose these rules, trade unions have decided to now protest on 9th of July all over India, adding that all sections will participate in the protest actively. So what do the new rules really mean for Andhra as well as for labours all across India? Let's talk about that. Joining us is Nalla Mothu Chakraborty. He's a political analyst from Andhra. Also with us is Dr. Kiran Preet Kaur, human resources expert and global talent acquisition strategist. Nalla Mothu, I want to come to you first, sir. You know, some of these changes in labour laws by the Andhra government are welcomed by many investors who are hoping to set shop in Andhra, but at the same time also raising concerns on what it really means for workers.
Andhra Pradesh, after division, has been economically behind Telangana in terms of growth. So, you know, inviting businesses and creating a business-friendly environment is welcome.
Hello.
But, sir, you know, me coming from a free markets environment, I mean, we prefer deregulation of a lot of these labor laws so that there's voluntary work environment between employees and employers. Today, if you look at it in India, IT sector has been exempted and seem to be working really fine in terms of work hours. There are no onerous restrictions from the government, but that doesn't necessarily resulted in you know, exploitation of workers, which some of our communist friends constantly talk about. And then if you look at the gig workers, today there are 1 crore gig workers, there are no hours as such implemented, and workers are free to work as many hours they want. Similarly, if you look at farm employees today, which is the largest workforce in the country, there are no restrictions as such. People work long hours, short hours as it demands. Our preference is, you know, today India is burdened by onerous labor laws. There are about 40 labor acts, Payment of Wages Act, Minimum Wages Act, Industrial Dispute Act, Factories Act, Mines Act. I can go on and on, you know, the Pensions Act, Provident Funds Act, acts related to healthcare, and rest of the world is marching ahead. You know, China is 4 to 5 times larger economy than India, and other countries are growing. So in some ways, my concern is raising the hours could give a free hand to the industries to increase the work hours. What my preference, or you know, from a free market perspective, is to just deregulate these laws so that employers and employees can get into a mutual agreement, as it is happening in the United States, where there are 44 hours week, but they can work as many hours as they want as long as they pay overtime. That is in the United States. Same thing in Singapore. Actually, United States has 40 hours a week. Singapore has 44 hours a week.
Just to clarify,
employers
Mr.
and employees can
Chakravarti,
negotiate with each other to have flexible hours.
just to clarify, Mr. Chakravarti, you're saying deregulating existing rules would suffice and these changes were not needed?
Deregulation itself is a change. So what I'm saying is, take the US and Singapore model. Let the employer and the employees negotiate whatever is the most optimal hours. So in the US case, what they've done is 40 hours a week, but employer and employee can negotiate and have longer hours as long as the employer is paying more for the excess. And Singapore also has a limit on 44 hours, but an employer and employee can enter an arrangement where they can have longer or shorter hours.
So do you fear raising these working hours would actually be detrimental to private employees?
It would. I'm saying it would certify or give them a free hand to raise the employee wages or employee hours, given that the government itself is certifying it. It should be more of a mutual arrangement. For example, I'll give you, China, because you mentioned Communist Party leader Ram Krishna, who is a good friend of mine. I'm a capitalist, he's a communist, but we share a lot of issues in terms of how these things happen. But if you go to China, China has implemented 996. 9 to 9 work hours, 6 hours, 6 days a week. And the government has actively supported such a provision, and it resulted in a lot of discontent among employees. And my proposal is, let it be flexible. In IT sector, they have done it. In gig sector, they have done it. Let the employers and the employees decide, what are the most optimal hours. I mean, it doesn't have to be a government mandated setup.
All right. Well, that's a fair point. It could be mutually decided between the employer and the employee. But at the same time, I also want to get your views on the changes that have been brought in for women workers. Now, there are provisions that women workers can work through the night in the night shift, given that they agree to it to begin with. And if they do, transport has to be provided. The workplace has to be fully illuminated. Are you happy with these changes? Because these changes for sure allow women workers to now work and earn an extra money, extra living.
Yes, I mean, I think it is good in terms of bringing the women labor force into these high-paying productive sectors, especially in IT, where they have late-night hours. But this is not new. This is already there in Telangana, in Hyderabad. This is already there in Karnataka, Bangalore. So Andhra Pradesh, in some ways, is catching up. However, my concern again is, if you make these special provisions, where today in Hyderabad, an IT women employee, if she is working beyond 8 o'clock, a car has to be arranged from her place of employment and should be dropped at her home with a guard. I mean, she cannot be sent alone. So either a co-employee has to accompany her if they're all living in the same place, or a security person has to accompany, which disincentivizes companies to hire women in the night. See, we want women to freely participate in the labor force. So these kind of adds cost to the companies. This may discourage companies from hiring the women. It is the government's job to ensure that women can live in peace and travel and enjoy all the freedoms that men enjoy. But the burden is now being put on the companies, which discourages them to hire women.
All right. Well, this could further mean that workplaces will have to make more provisions for women employees. Not sure how it's going to be helpful for women employees. But Dr. Kiranpreet Kaur, who's a human resources expert, also joining us on the show right now. Dr. Kaur, are you worried with these developments? A lot of heads will be rolling if the limit on working hours is changed from 9 to 10. And on top of that, to what extent can you really work over and above? And quarterly, if those numbers are also changed, the overtime numbers are also changed, people would be worried that if these were to be implemented pan-India, what would it really mean for them?
Thank you so much for, first of all, having me here. Well, it is something to be worried about. My first take is, while we're on the race of competing with China and Vietnam in terms of, becoming the largest global manufacturing hub, we must also understand that India is quite a sensitive market where anyway employees are working more than the hours designed in the policies by a lot of organizations. By increasing the time, they're going to get a cut on the overtime. They were anyway working for 10 hours in a lot of cases, but now they will not be paid for it. On the other side, I mean, I think this should be first experimented in probably SEZs to understand what, in pros it's helping us, because of course now the companies are going to save a lot of OPEX, because instead of having three, uh, you know, uh, uh, timings, they can have just two, slots where people can work for 10 hours and still, give the same output that they were giving in three shifts earlier. So a lot of things on the, policy and the guidelines need to be changed. A lot of audits need to happen. We need to ensure that the dignity of Indian workforce remains there. They are not exploited and they are able to make their hard-earned money in an efficient way.
All right. And in fact, the break hour, which was earlier supposed to be 5 hours after continuous 5 hours of work, has also now been changed to 6 hours. These are significant changes. I have to ask you, Dr. Kaur, what happens if an employee does not really agree to it? Do they really have a choice? All right, I think we've lost the feed there with Dr. Kiranpreet Kaur, but I want to come back to you, Mr. Chakravarti. Obviously, as both of you mentioned, there are concerns. What happens to workers? Would they be further exploited? But at the same time, India is an ambitious country. And, looking at what the government is saying, it says that these amendments are important if we were to bring our workforce at par with global rules. There is a very divided opinion here, Mr. Chakravarti. One side of the people who continue to insist that on one hand, there are Western countries who are moving to 3-day, 4-day-a-week model. On the other hand, India's further pushing its workforce to work till a point of exhaustion. So are we really competing ourselves to the third world countries while also aspiring to be the third biggest economy in the world? We're already at fourth. Are we moving backward?
Right. I mean, ease of doing business is what they're trying to, target the state government. But no, globally there are hardly any developed countries where you see 10 hours a day work day. There aren't. I mean, they're mostly 40 hours. In Europe, there are countries, I think France has 35 hours. After 35 hours, if you work any longer hours, you pay overtime. And as far as India being the fourth largest economy, it comes by the fact of our population. I mean, by on a per capita basis, on an average basis, we are still a very backward country. Compared to our neighbor China, our per capita income is 1/4 or even 1/5. Right? An average Indian earns a lot less than an average Chinese. I'm not even talking about the United States. So this fourth largest economy gives us bragging rights, but doesn't reflect on the ground in terms of prosperity for the individual. So a country that is backward has to work harder to get ahead. I do not deny it. But I'm only arguing that this kind of government mandating or government giving a free hand is not the right way to go forward. It is more should be a dynamic workforce, which if it doesn't like the work hours, it should be able to move from one company to the other. Gives them the freedom to put pressure on the employers when their work hours get very unreasonable. That happens in IT sector today. The attrition rate 2 or 3 years ago when these reports were published is between 20 and 25%. That means every 1 in 4 IT employees were quitting jobs at one point.
Right.
And that is what the kind of pressure we need on the employers to make sure the workplace standards go up.
Absolutely.
That's how you get your wages up. That's how you control your work hours.
All right, and I think Dr. Kaur is back with us. Dr. Kaur, before I let the two of you go, I have to ask you, what happens if an employer doesn't want to work 10 hours? What if they don't agree to it? Do they have a way out, or do they have to now really work now that it's government approved?
Well, that's the scenario. While, of course, the consent will be taken, but at the same time now, these people will be forced. That's why this is worrisome. I think it's up to the unions to decide how they would like to address this, formally. But not everyone would be comfortable, because it is a less amount which they were earning in terms of OT is, managed in their enhanced salary on a monthly basis, I think they will be comfortable. Nobody likes to work for free. And for them, it's their hard-earned money. They wouldn't be compromising on for sure. So it is upon government, policy revamp that has to take place, where they are mentioned